Hello, I'm Matthew from Rock Paper Shotgun. Thank you for coming here today. Welcome to EGX 2018. A clap. Hooray! Wonderful, we're off to a great start. Congratulations for making it to this, the first talk of the EGX developer sessions. We've got loads of great stuff lined up over the next 4 days, but this one is particularly interesting. It's been described as a mashup of Animal Crossing and Papers, Please. Do we have Animal Crossing fans here? Do we have Papers, Please fans here? Are there people who want to see them crushed together into something crazy? Wonderful. In a second, I'm going to welcome Dante Knox, who is the developer of this game, and Steve Stops, who's the development director at Excalibur. But before that, let's take a quick look at... Oh, God, that's embarrassing. Willowbrooke post. Thank you.
Our dearest Sam, please forgive our delay in writing. Your father and I have had much to contend with. We have to leave our beloved Willowbrooke, and we need you to take care of the post office in our absence. We know this is a lot to ask of you, but would not do so unless it was absolutely necessary. We shall return in a year's time and hope you can support the villagers and our livelihood until then. I'll explain more when you get here. Head to the station on New Year's Eve. Your ticket will be waiting for you. With love, Mum and Dad.
Hold on. Take a seat.
So we've just had our first little look at Willowbrooke Post. I imagine there are a lot of questions people have about this game. So let's start with the broadest one possible. What is the concept of Willowbrooke Post?
Right, okay, yep. So you're in charge of your parents' livelihood and post office during their mysterious absence for 12 months a year. So you've been invited back into your childhood home to basically come and run it, maintain its presence within the village, look after customers, serve them, build your reputation and your relationships with them, and discover a few mysteries along the way.
So,
in a nutshell.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Willowbrooke itself? Like, what is the location of this game?
Yeah, it's kind of within a fictional English village.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Is it set in, is it fantasy? Is it set in a realistic world? Like,
it has trappings in the real world, right?
We kind of think of it as almost in a little kind of outside time and space as we know it, in its own little fictional environment. It's got, you know, that kind of old school 1950s close community charm to it,
right.
But we have trappings like phones and computers and stuff. So I think it's like a fictional time all of its own, or sort of a little village that's kept on to everything it loved, but has adopted modern technology where it finds it useful.
The fact that you've still got a community built around a post office suggests it's a little bit back in time. Or of a different time.
In a world where it was more desired or, required back in the day.
As a publisher, we're in darkest Oxfordshire, so we're used to these tiny little quaint villages that have their own special little vibe, and I think it's kind of like that.
They still exist.
Yeah. You do communicate by email, I'm assuming?
You do.
Yeah, there is definitely email, but we also support written post because it's a post office.
Yeah. And sort of tonally, what's the sort of vibe of this game? Because, when I heard this initial pitch of sort of Animal Crossing meets Papers, Please, I think Papers, Please is a very sinister game, but this doesn't kind of give me that vibe. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So there is an overbearing air of mystery. There are things to discover within the environment and about your family. But it is primarily about the community, right?
Well,
so
you know, in a sense, if you've ever seen films like the original Wicker Man, where you turn up at a village, everything seems nice on the surface, but there's just something slightly off-kilter and not quite right. I think that's the vibe, yeah. One of the things that drew us to the game, when as a publisher, when we're looking for games to sign, we found an early build just online of the game that Dante created, and it's full of this warmth and charm and personality, and that's what initially drew us to sign the game, was the amount of personality they'd managed to create in the game. But then as you start playing it a little bit more, you start to see that there's this little edge to things. Little things you discover as you're going around your parents' house that don't quite feel right.
Yeah, it's a bit cheeky as well. A bit sexy.
I think some of the stuff we'll see in some of the later clips will kind of give maybe a better idea of that tone. I'm also really interested in just the general look of the thing, because you know, some of the kind of characters that we'll see later have got quite a strange look to them, but then it's got this really nice sort of pixel, sort of 3D pixel style. Can you sort of talk a little bit about how you kind of came to that?
Yeah, so very, very early on, it started out as like a hyper-realistic looking simulator. It was a lot less heavy mechanic-wise, but the tone didn't really suit it. So I started learning pixel art. I blocked a few things out in Unity, Game Maker, that kind of thing. And then eventually it became first person and actually started to represent something that I had in my mind. But it's still a long, long way to go, and I'm still learning as I go in certain aspects. And I can't program at all, so it's all visual scripting, which allows me to prototype and iterate quite quickly.
And what exactly is like your background with games? You know, for people who don't know you.
Yeah, well, I wanted to get into film direction, but that sort of somehow became game development.
Right.
I like to write. I like to do a lot of creative writing, and I realized that a non-linear media was the best way to represent and give the player immersion. And then I picked up Unity back when it was super, super young. And then about 10 years later, I put out a couple of Steam games that didn't necessarily do so well, but it was a learning curve. But now I'm beginning to make my forays into the first fully professional title that I've ever worked on, I've ever developed. So
I think that's one of the super interesting things about the time we're in now. Like, just to be super clear about this, we were joking earlier when we were going through job titles, and Dante said, I'm lead developer. He's lead developer because he's the only person making the game. He's lead developer, lead artist, lead designer, lead across the game. And I think that's the thing that I love about the world we're in now. You go around like the show floor and you've got the big AAA titles, but there's loads of independent titles, the quality of games that can be made on tools like Unity by independent people, where you can express that freedom and creativity and vision that you couldn't do with a larger team. You don't get that same purity that you get with working with an independent developer. It's amazing.
And from your perspective, Steve, from Excalibur's end of thing, how did you discover this game? What was your, how did your sort of relationship develop?
So as a publisher, if you come to our stand and you look at the games we made, most of our games are made by one-man band developers. There's a couple of exceptions to that. And so we seem to have a good track record in signing people's first games when they're brand new developers and they're just looking for that first break. So we spend a lot of time kind of scouring the underside of the internet, looking for interesting projects and looking for interesting developers. And sometimes we'll be following them from their really early projects, and then we see something that's the right fit for us. And Dante's game is exactly one of those. So Chris, who was our lead product guy at the time, was looking around. He discovered an early build, and we looked at it. And like I said earlier, it's just, there's two parts to the game. We'll see as we go through the videos. There's really strong gameplay, but there's these really great, quirky characters. And in the environments, in this kind of, I know it's like a Minecraft-esque vision, but when you actually go in and you start experiencing environments, they're just full of warmth and full of charm and full of character. And that hasn't changed. We have a playable build out on the floor today. We'll talk about that later, that people can play after this. And you'll get a sense, pretty much the first few minutes of that game is the first few minutes that we saw. And hopefully you can all see then why we signed it, because it's just so charming and so lovely. Sorry, I don't want to make you feel embarrassed, but we fell in love with it from those minutes, and we could see the promise in the game.
And you mentioned those characters. Should we maybe take a quick look at,
one of them?
one of your interactions with a character in the game?
Sure. Magnifique.
So this is our first introduction to the lovely Magnifique, one of the kind of key characters of the game. Tell us a bit about Magnifique.
Yep, so he's a very effervescent character. He likes to be the center of attention.
But excited about something new. What's he doing?
This is not a rare occurrence. This is quite a common thing for this guy. So occasionally he will come in and he'll talk to you, and the more you get to know him, the more he's like an onion, a narrative onion. He will start to reveal layers that aren't necessarily outwardly visible. He loves his mum. He's very... His act is a persona. You discover through other mechanics what his name is. He likes to be referenced as this character in particular. But yeah, I think all the characters have a certain narrative arc, don't they?
They've all got depth to them.
Depth,
but,
yeah.
so,
that was
Magnifique,
important.
Like the
that
scene
was...
you just saw there is again, it's in a demo you can play, but it's the first time you meet Magnifique. He turns up very excited about a parcel that you've got for him. And this is the interesting thing that in the game. One of the really clever things, we'll talk about it, I'm sure, in depth later on, is you then get to choose what you do with that character, how you interact with them, and it affects how he feels about you. And he starts off, I think, quite sceptical of you as a new person to the village, and you have to invest time in the character to try and get to know them.
So are all your interactions with the characters done in the post office?
They are, but as they go out into the world and they live their lives outside of the post office, you can contact them via writing letters, emails, you can call them up on the phone, and the more social, the more reputable you become, they will just come in just to say hello.
Right.
I think when we were chatting about the game in the early stages, what Dante was really passionate about was, look, one of the things in Animal Crossing is you can write letters, but the characters don't necessarily respond to you. We wanted that level of depth and response. So we've got systems in the game where you can write letters to the characters and they'll respond to you. And how you choose to interact with them will affect how you build your relationship with them and how they respond to you in the game. And it's hard, it's a management game, but it's a management game with lots of characters in it. And you could just do the management game and not interact with the characters. You can interact with the characters to try and get something you need to further your game experience, or you can interact with the characters because you're interested in finding out more about the characters. And these are all choices you have.
Yeah.
Can you have a negative relationship with a character but still run a successful business?
Absolutely. And you can also get to the point where if you antagonize somebody too much, they'll just up and leave and never be seen again.
Well, they'll leave the entire town.
If you decide to be a complete
their postman was
renegade.
that bad.
Yeah, and if you keep... There are actually multiple endings. This is something we'll talk about later. But one of them will actually just see you being ousted from the premises by the law. So good luck with that. But yeah, no, the depth would, how you interact with them, like Steve was mentioning the letter system from Animal Crossing. I just felt that it was something that could be delivered a lot more intelligently by the characters. I wanted them to respond to you in a direct way rather than a very ambiguous manner.
And I think earlier on, when we were talking before, you mentioned that there was an element of... you had a choice in terms of how of actions that you could do with the characters, and things would sort of branch off differently. Could you maybe give us sort of an example of that?
Yep. So if a character comes into the post office to pick up a parcel, you can either do the right thing, well, whatever you term to be right, you can give them the parcel, they'll pay for it, be on their way, very happy, very nice. Or you can open up the parcel, you can lie to them, say it never arrived. Oh no, it got broken in transit, and they'll go, oh, that's a shame, and walk off. Or they may seem to suspect something, but not quite know what. You can, so an example, there may be a mission, a quest, where somebody requires in the village a cake baked, but you can't make that cake because a vital ingredient's missing. And you're like, right, there's a chef character that's in the village, and he has a box of ingredients that comes in once a day, or once a week, sorry, and that ingredient's in the box. So now you can go, right, I can either source that ingredient myself, or I could just take that and not tell him that the parcel arrived and keep the ingredient and complete the quest yourself. You can do things like that, but the depth of interacting and sort of steering the characters around was important. That was something I wanted to get in very early.
It's one of the really dark things we liked about the game. One of the things I personally love about games like Papers, Please is those moral dilemmas that the game presents you with. I always think the best games, and the thing we can do in games that you can't do in film, you can't do in any other medium, is most of the game happens in your head. You know, Papers, Please is a great example where I played it on the iPad and I spent loads of time fastidiously positioning my passport, making my stamp exactly in the right place. I was a very fastidious passport control person, and that then reflected how I dealt with all the different dilemmas I was faced with in the game. And we want to do more than that. So a great example is you could choose to open someone's letter and read it. So any piece of post that's passing through the post office between a character and their parents or somewhere else, you can pass that on and you can be a good post person and not open it, or you can open it.
Yeah.
And you can find out more. And you can be a busybody and you can use that information to further your own game experience, or you could just be nosy and be finding out stuff, or you could be trying to solve part of the mystery that's happening, and all of these choices are yours, and that will affect how the game responds to you. So, for example, if imagine I open a letter and I find out it's someone's birthday in a couple of days' time, but the only way I could have known that by opening the letter, and I forget that, and I send them a birthday card, then I can be discovered that, hey, hang on, how did you know it was my birthday? And so you've got all these different, that old adage of, if you're going to lie, you better have a really good memory. That applies to this game. If you're going to read people's posts, you're going to find out stuff. That could be useful, but you might need to remember how you found it out.
Yeah.
Did you know them? Did you read it in a letter?
Yeah.
Does this all stem from like a post-opening fantasy that you have yourself? Like, is this something you've pondered in the past?
I just woke up one morning and thought, do you know what? The post office is perfect for gamification, because you've got the customers that come in, they're your NPCs. You've got community events on a wall. Okay, there can be a quest board there, and then you've got the resource management, so you've got to make sure your bills are paid, you've got to bring in the money. Okay, let's add a stamina element into it, so cooking.
That sounds like Dante doesn't want to answer your direct question of do you steal people's posts?
There was no past off. No, there was no fantasy representing.
I haven't either.
No,
honest.
I can't say
I
that.
haven't.
Yeah,
but here's an interesting thing. It's a thing that happens in games all the time, but we don't really think about. But we try and get people to think about in this game a little bit. So if you play any first-person adventure game, or in fact any adventure game, the first thing you do when you go into an environment is you start looking in drawers, looking for little bonuses and food and health and all those things. That's what we do. If you went into someone's house and you did that, they'd be deeply upset with you. It's snooping and intrusive, right? But this is what we do in games. This is what games teach us to do. But what we want to do is start having and highlighting some of the consequences of that. You're in your parents' home. They've asked you to come and look in after their home while they're away for a year, trying to keep their business running. And you can snoop about in their home. You know, their bedroom door happens to be locked. There may or may not be an attic that may have a lock on it. There are drawers you can look in, and you can start uncovering stuff. But do you want to do that in your parents' home, and will you be happy with what you find out?
Probably not, I'd imagine.
No.
Should
Not in a bedroom.
Should we take a look at another clip?
Sure.
Looking at some of your kind of more managerial duties and how you actually interact with the post office.
Absolutely. Cool.
So there was quite a lot to pick through there in terms of interactions.
Very busy.
Can you just talk us through what are like the sort of broad duties of a postman in this world?
Yeah. The collection and receiving of parcels from customers. When they come in to post a letter, you have to be responsible for emptying the box out and then making sure that all the mail is sorted. The envelopes meet certain guidelines, and then they get sent off. You have to sort out junk mail that appears. That can be open for random bonuses, but you could also backfire, and there could be like sticky shampoo samples in there that affect your stamina for the rest of the day. So you kind of have to decide, this junk mail could be good or not. There
was some parcel wrapping in there as well?
Yeah, parcel wrapping. So you can send anything in your inventory off as a parcel.
Right.
You can even open up a customer's parcel and then send them that item after telling them it didn't arrive, and that can cause controversy. They could either come straight back and say, well, what's this then? And then that's a whole other line of renegade action that can happen. That arc can be activated now, and we can go down that path.
There was a desk shot that looked very much like Papers, Please. With
Yep,
stamps
that was the mail. That was the mail sorting.
So
yeah.
you're approving mail there, is that?
So there's like a guideline book. Envelope quality. How heavy is the envelope? Does the postage cover the delivery? All these different things. Does the address even exist? And then you can stamp pass or fail. Even if the envelope's good and it meets all the criteria, you can still stamp it as a fail. And then there's another line of mechanics that haven't been worked into it yet, where you deal with those flagged letters.
Obviously, in Papers, Please, there was this quite desperate kind of like struggle for survival.
Yeah,
you're really up against
gritty.
it. In terms of sort of the sort of tone or the pacing of this as a management game, how does it? Would you say this compares?
It's a lot more relaxed. It's a lot more,
I think it's fair to say it gets hectic as it goes on and busy. underpinning the whole game, its real central heart, if I want to kind of distill the game down to its core, is a central management game. You know, your parents have entrusted you with their post office. That post office has bills and running costs. If you don't maintain enough money to keep the post office open, your parents are going to be deeply upset with you because your post office is going to get closed down. The villagers are going to be upset with you because they'll have no post office. So at the card, there is that kind of underlying tension to the game where you have to make enough money each month to pay your bills and keep the post office open. And underlying that is this management. You need to sort post and serve customers to make money to keep the post office open. And you need to manage the amount of work you've got coming in every day with your stamina. So you saw a little brief glimpse. There's a cookery book. You have to eat 3 meals a day like you should to make sure your stamina's maintained. You go to bed every night to recharge your batteries. And if you start working too hard and missing meals, you're going to fall asleep at your desk and you're not going to get enough stuff done. So this core management game of managing the amount of money coming in with the amount of work you've got to do against your stamina sits underneath it. So this is, at its heart, a management game that happens to have a world of charming characters and mystery for you to then explore and interact with.
Yeah, I think that's, for me, what's really interesting is this idea of the kind of management game colliding with characters who maybe have personal stakes. Like, you want your relationships to do well, but you want to run a successful business. The balance of those two things.
At the same time, yeah.
And I guess that is a question the game's going to raise quite a lot.
Yeah. I'm trying to make sure that it's not one or the other. Me personally, I'm more towards the narrative. Really enjoyed Stardew Valley, and one of the things I wanted to try and take from that was these characters, these great personalities that you have. I really wanted to make sure that the relationships meant something. So there's this huge overarching narrative. There's like the core story, which has something to do with your parents. But all these other mini stories that you have with these characters, you go, oh, great, Chris has come in, or oh, great, Martin's there. I wanted you to look forward to seeing them in the office, and that was very important to me.
I think there's something magical about where it harks back to that bygone age where things like the post office were a little central hub of communities. You know, in an age where everything's become disparate and most of people's social interactions are happening in a digital space spread across the world, which is great. This is back to that, a return to that kind of physical nature where people would want, you know, some people, the only interaction they'd get with the outside world would be when they went to their post office. And, you know, if you go to that favourite coffee shop or you go somewhere every day, and the first few times you go in, you're just another customer.
Yeah.
But as you go in over time, they learn your name, and then they learn more about you, and then they ask how your day's going. That's what we wanted to do, is have that relationship that you build with people over time, that you have to work out. People like Magnifique aren't going to become your friends overnight. You have to work and nurture those relationships and deal with the ups and downs and understand how they are as a person to get the best out of them.
Yeah, some characters will affect the overall amount of reputation you'll gain more than others. So Magnifique is a major charger, but he can also severely diminish your reputation overall if, you know, you are mean to him and don't keep him happy.
And I think you touched on it earlier, you know, part of that management game, if you start damaging your reputation with your customers, they're not going to come in as frequently, so therefore you're not going to make as much money.
Can't make
so
the
therefore
bills. Yeah, and it's downward spiral.
And with the game going into early access, what are people actually going to have in that early access build when it launches? You know, what is the kind of, what are you trying to achieve by going into early access, I guess?
I think there's two parts to that question. From my perspective, Dante might have a different view. As the publisher, we've got two parts to it. So for us, early access is always a true early access. What I've learned, I've been in the games industry, not a huge amount by some standards, but like about 12 years or so. And what I learned over that time, in the old days when I first started, you'd sit in a room, you'd make a game, you'd burn it onto a disc, and then you'd send that disc out to the world and you'd hope people liked it. And then some people would love it and some people hate it. What we get with early access in the digital world is we get to start asking that question early. We get to put builds out to people. So we start today with people coming and playing a game. They get to speak to Dante and open up that dialogue. So I really like this. I'm not sure about this. Then we get to do alpha, and then we get to do beta, and we get to play it with more and more people. Then we hit early access, and then all gloves are off. The world will tell us what they think of the game, and they'll tell us what they love and what they don't love, and we can then start working on that game. So for us, the important thing to have at early access are the core things for the game. So we need there to be a really strong management game because that's the central bit. So that's the bit we're working on at the moment. We're at that exciting moment where we've got the mechanics in and we can start changing those mechanics to find the fun. We can see kind of the fun poking its head above the parapet now. We can just tune that. And then introducing the characters and the story. So the core early access will be the introduction to the game and that core management game loop. You'll be sorting post, you'll be serving customers, there'll be some customers for you to start learning about, there'll be some of the allusion to the story. And then over time, we'll be doing 2 core things. We'll be adding to that story to build the arc that Dante's got planned, and then we'll be responding to what people tell us they like and don't like about the game.
And do you have sort of dream features that you'd like to add down the line, or?
Yes.
Can you share?
I think we should talk about some of
something.
We're just careful, because you know what it's like? Because when people tell us what they want, we'll start acting on that, and there'll be things that we think we want to put in the game that may never end up making it in because people don't want them.
Yeah.
But I think things like the garden's a good example of stuff that we're super passionate about putting in.
Yeah. So there's there will be a garden. There's the door's in place, but it's not out there yet, and it will be you'll be able to maintain crops. But it goes beyond that. There's other expansions that I've got in mind that involve ruins and mysteries that will revolve around you needing notepad and paper, like the old school way of discovering. Okay, there's ruins. What does that mean? Okay, and all these got lots of things planned.
I love the idea of a mystery-solving postman. That's like prime ITV
I know,
Sunday evening.
There's an anime around that somewhere,
I'd
right?
watch it.
Yeah, I would.
I think we're going to open up the floor to some questions. Cool. There will be a mic in the middle. If you have any questions, please do come up and ask. But just while you're doing that, I think we're going to watch the announcement trailer for the game.
Oh, cool. Okay, sweet.
In which case,
He's a weirdo. He's a weirdo.
But no one might. I will ask you some more questions.
There's one there. Look, that person definitely wants to ask questions.
Sorry, apologies.
The lights are so bright.
It's quite a long walk up there.
Hello. Are you okay?
Oh, yeah, I forgive you for
can sit down.
ignoring me.
We didn't ignore you. We saw you.
I did.
Anyway, those characters, are they based on people that you've had real-life experiences with?
Oh, that's interesting.
You don't have to name names.
No.
We understand.
I think-
it's fine. If they're all based on your mum or something, that's all right. But
I think that's the only way you can make good characters, right? By having a real-life experiences with weirdos, right? In a good way?
Yes.
So,
definitely.
yes, to answer your question, yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
No problems. Thank you very much.
If someone makes a big enough impression at you
Yes.
when they come and play the demo, could they potentially find themselves bleeding into
So
the
you
game?
need to be careful. Okay.
Oh, my word.
All right.
If there's a really clumsy interviewer who completely forgets the name of the game at the intro.
I have to change the name for legal reasons, but you'll get the idea. Yeah.
But I also saw there was some letter writing in the game. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, the system looked quite interesting. You were kind of piecing together.
Yeah, so that thing was a pain in the arse to brute force in. So going back to what we said about Animal Crossing earlier on, I felt the responses you get back from the characters, am I raspy there? I felt the responses from the characters could be a bit random. I wasn't quite sure how that system worked. So I wanted something that was really reactive, really personalized to you, and I wanted the responses to seem intelligent. And I've looked at 1,000 different ways to do it, and in the end, the only way to do it was to match what you were typing in with a huge database, and then, okay, they've said that, right, okay, doof. So that's a 100% personalized and accurate response to your letter. And you select, so those of you who've played Dark Souls, you'll see the stone writing system, the message. So it works in the same way. You are selecting from phrases, and then you build your letter. But there's a lot more depth to it than just selecting a pre-made sentence. You'll have different objects to select from. You can refer to characters, food, objects, all these different things. But yeah, in terms of mechanic, it was brute forced. So, yeah.
Sorry,
look
got
at that.
a question here.
It is quite low. It's quite low.
Thank you.
Hello.
Cheers, man. Yeah, you talked about narrative, and that's
Yeah.
an area you like. So, is there some overarching narratives all the way through that will happen regardless of your choices?
Yes, there are.
And how much of that is on balance versus the one you make yourself through your choices? And one last bit on the end of that, you hint in the trailer at a larger and somewhat seemingly oppressive world with where your parents mysteriously go to. Is there anything that touches on that as you go? If that's a huge spoiler, don't worry.
Not so much like evil, omnipresent was the word used. There will be answers. There will be answers to those questions. I think that's really what I can say without...
Yeah, it's super scary when you're doing an announcement thing like this. It's so easy as a developer where you know stuff. You say something and then all of a sudden it's a massive spoiler. So, so Dante's being super, super cautious.
You've got to be careful.
I guess there was two other bits to your question, which is there's an overarching narrative and there's definitely a story we want to tell end to end. Not everyone's going to get to experience that story because you have to run a post office, and if the post office closes midway through,
that's considered the good ending, the canonical ending.
Someone was saying earlier, can you win the game? Well, can you win life? Can you win at anything? But there's loads of alternative things that can happen. And so the experience you get, and what we're really trying to play with is how much narrative happens in your head, how much of what you get from the game is the engagement you have with the different characters, and that will flesh out a different world for you. But there's also a story that Dante wants to tell in the arc as well. So all of those things intertwine in an interesting way.
Mysterious way. I just wanted to mention there's also an element of, I wouldn't call them random character events, but there are things you can trigger through your interactions with characters that will guarantee something happening a couple of months down the road. So yeah, it's up to you. How you interact with the characters can drive these other events.
And it's that beautiful thing. You can have one experience, you play through the game, you can play through it again and have a different experience. So yeah, it gives you that time. Some things. There have to be some.
Yeah, there have to be,
Yeah.
Just for plot reasons.
So there's a lot of these management-type games where it goes indefinitely, things like Stardew Valley, Slime Rancher. So what was with the choice to make it a limited time? Is it to limit the narrative so you can have a defined plot? Or
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And within some of that, let's just say, again, I don't want to spoil it, but there are different options where actually that time-limited thing may not be a thing or may be a thing. So, So if you enjoy running your post office and you want to run your post office forever because that's your thing and you love it, and you build these lovely relationships with your characters and you want to keep that, that's an option for people.
Yeah, year 2 could be something completely different to year 1. There could be different circumstances.
But we have a narrative arc for the first year.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I've got no more questions at the mic. One last silly question, because you always have to end with a silly question.
Why not?
What's the weirdest thing you've either received in the post or sent in the post?
I used to get...
Got to turn these
I don't know
mics
how
off.
they got my details. When I used to run a small game studio, I used to get... A Chinese production company would send me, without fail, once a month, a different thing that if I paid them money, they would do with my branding. And it always had my name on it. And my favourite thing I got from them was I got a metal pen that had like a little light in it, and it had like a little tape measure that came out of it, and it had a little rubber thing, if you pulled it off, that you could touch your phone with it as well. So, and I used it, but every month I got a free thing with my name on it, and it was amazing. So that's my favourite thing. Not particularly weird.
You can't beat receiving goodies in the post.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, thank you so much for introducing us to the Willowbrooke Post.
Thanks so much for joining us. And
thank
so
you.
this is a terrifying time for Dante, so be nice to Dante, because this is genuinely, as we finish this, we're turning the PC on and booting the game up, and it's genuinely the first time outside of a very small group of people in the studio that anyone has ever played the game. So please be nice to Dante, but please come and play the game. We're just by the main entrance, and tell Dante what you think, what you like and what you don't like.
Please be honest.
This is
That's all I ask.
Be honest, give us your
honest.
feedback, because it's the only way we can make the game better. So please tell us what you think, and thank you so much for joining us. It's an exciting time for us.
A big round of applause for Dante and Steve.
Thank you. Cool.
Thank you.